Welcome back to the Present Fathers Podcast. This is a very special episode with someone who has played a humongous influence on the podcast, Dr. Meg Meeker. Dr. Meg Meeker is a pediatrician who has worked with thousands of children, and through her work with children, started picking up on some alarming trends as it relates to the role of a father. She has devoted much of her professional life into helping men understand how to be better fathers for their families. This episode is going to be extremely powerful for you because she gives targeted advice for men to deal with the issues of today and practical advice that you can apply into your lives to make a bigger impact on your children. She has a lot of encouragement for men and shares some of her personal experiences and how her own father played a massive role in her life. I am beyond excited to share this episode with you because she is someone who has played such a big influence on me personally, as well as the other men of the podcast. And we hope that this also inspires you to show up as a better father. Before you begin the episode, I highly recommend you look into her books. Two that really stand out and have played a massive impact on me are first, Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, and the second book is the book called Hero by Meg Meeker. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. I'm really excited, and you're going to love this one. Dr. Meg Meeker, welcome to the Present Fathers Podcast. We are absolutely thrilled to have you today and very excited to speak with you. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yes. So our whole podcast read Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, and Hero. Both were really impactful for us as we were just getting started, not just for doing the podcast, but to become better dads straight up, and really lit a fire in us to really lean into what we're doing with this. So it's an honor to have you here, about a year after that happened, to kind of tie the knot and move it forward. So can we start with, in the book, you talk about how your dad played a massive role in you kind of finding your own courage to kind of step out and do what you believe you were meant to do. And I think that'd be a beautiful way to start this episode, is the role that he played in kind of giving you that inspiration. And if you could kind of just tell the audience a little bit about how that shaped your whole life, really.
Sure. You bet. First of all, I want to preface it by saying men who read the father-daughter book assume my dad was a great, perfect, wonderful dad. He was a good dad. He was a great dad. He had his problems. And so I just want to encourage every dad out there who listens to me going, wow, your dad must have had a PhD in psychology. He didn't. But he was really great where it mattered. When I was 16, I decided I was going to go to medical school. That was it. I got the bug. And from 16 to basically 21, I just studied my heart out at school. And I just was so focused on getting to medical school. My senior year in college, I applied to probably 20, 25 medical schools. And I got rejection letter after rejection letter from the medical schools. And the final rejection letter came in. And at 21, I thought, my life is over. I mean, I don't have a plan B. This is all I wanted. What's going to happen? So I went to live at home for a year. And I remember walking in the house, walking by my father's study, and I overheard him on the phone. And he was a very quiet man, wasn't on the phone much. And I heard him say my name. So I stopped in front of the door and I heard him say a sentence that changed my life. One sentence out of my father's mouth changed my life. And I heard him say to whoever was on the phone, yes, my daughter Meg will be going to medical school in the next couple of years. In that moment, I knew I was going to go. In that moment, because my dad said so. When I heard the tone of his voice, the inflection, the way he was talking to his friend, he believed in me so much when I didn't believe in myself. My mother would say, oh, don't worry, honey, you'll get in, you'll get in, you'll get in. And I love my mother. It's not that I wasn't, listening to what she was saying, but I thought, oh, my mom's got to say that. So maybe she's right, maybe she's wrong. But when your father says something like my father did, boom, it changed. And I knew in that moment I would get there. And so I just fired up again. And sure enough, a year later, I went. And it was just a pivotal moment in my life. And I think it's so beautiful and poignant that it was just one sentence that my father said. And a couple of years after that, I recounted that incident. He didn't remember saying that. Isn't that interesting? So he just spoke, and out of what he was speaking changed my life. And yet he was just speaking, very naturally about what he believed and thought.
That's such a great example. And just a quick follow up to that, so obviously you've been I don't want to misquote it, pediatric psychiatrist or psychologist?
I'm just a pediatrician.
Oh,
I'm
pediatrician. Okay. And so
yeah,
you've worked with
I'm an
thousands
MD.
of kids, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So it's funny, people think I'm all sorts of things I'm not, but I'm a pediatrician.
My
So
apologies.
I take care of kids from 0 to really about 21. I do a lot of behavioral pediatrics where I work on relationships with kids and their parents, because I work with a lot of teenagers. And if you work with teenagers and you're really interested in helping parents and their kids, you have to learn psychology. And so I learned it by listening literally to thousands of kids and their parents. So I'm one of those safe people, people who come and talk to me. No, I'm not a counselor, so it's okay to just come see your
Okay.
doctor, and I'm not a psychiatrist, but I've been doing this a long time and I've learned just through my pediatric practice.
Okay. Sorry to
It's okay.
misquote that there. Thanks
Oh,
for
no,
clearing
no
it up.
problem.
My real question was, so what exactly inspired you to dedicate so much of your professional life to men? When I first looked into that, and why it was such a big passion for you, it was a little rare, I guess you could say, because it just doesn't seem like many women would make that such a big portion of their life's work. So I'm just very curious on what was that driving factor for you, and what do you think that through your work is kind of the outcomes that we can all kind of work towards together?
Mhm. Well, I certainly never asked for it. I know it was God because it just got dropped in my lap, literally just dropped. I've written 7 books. Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters for me was my heart. And it just is extremely popular globally. It's in a number of different languages. But I wrote the book because as a pediatrician, I was seeing a lot of kids in my practice, particularly in the early 2000s, girls particularly, who were being really sexualized by our culture. And they were having all sorts of problems, and parents weren't able to deal with them. But one thing I saw was this, that girls who had a father involved, not a great dad, but just a dad who was there, he was involved, good guy, they did so much better through their teen years than girls who didn't have a dad. And but what was happening in our culture at the same time was the beginning of, or the amping up of, the anti-man movement. And I was very upset because if you turned on the television, you saw a dad portrayed in the media. They were dumb. They were the butt of everybody's jokes. They were really demeaned. And I thought, wait a minute, in real life, these are the guys that we need to help their kids, particularly your daughters, out of trouble if they're in trouble, and keep them out of trouble if they're not in trouble yet. So I thought, this is not okay. So I decided that I was going to write a book about great dads, and that I would write a book that never criticized a father, that gave good examples of good dads, starting with my own dad and my husband. We have 3 daughters and a son. And so I wrote it because I wanted dads to know the truth, and I wanted them to know the power that they really have in their kids' lives. And I would say, I think 99% of dads haven't a clue how much power they hold, because no one tells them. And certainly they're told they're not even needed. Women will say, we don't need a
Yep.
man to have a baby. We're just going to have this baby. And so that's really why I did what I did. And it hit a nerve. I was really pretty surprised. But I will say there's one other woman, Michelle Canfield, that I know of in the country who champions fathers. It's remarkable that more women aren't doing it.
Yeah, what you were just describing there was definitely my personal reaction to reading Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, was just how, with all the examples, right? Very visceral examples, real life examples that you give over and over and over. And same with Hero, right? All
Mhm.
So if you have sons too, that's a great book. Just feeling that as I read, I'm like, whoa, these little things I do really make a difference. And I hadn't really pondered how much of a difference they'd made until I read it in the
Yeah.
book. And
Yeah.
so I don't want to give the whole book away. Definitely go
Mhm.
pick it up for yourself. But what you were just describing there is, I think all of us here had that exact reaction. So I think
Wonderful.
Brandon has a follow-on question for you.
Yeah, I love the story that you tell about your dad talking about you on the phone and you overhearing it because what it requires for him to do that is he has to have hopes and dreams for you, right? And one of the things that you've mentioned many times before is making sure that fathers create hopes and dreams for their children because we're, we're the ones that best see the capabilities of our children, right?
You
And
bet.
so
Yes.
let's dive into that a little bit. Let's talk about how can dads help create hopes and dreams for their children, and then bring it into action because I know there's a couple questions that you usually ask to spur those things that kids feel internally.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I tried to do in the book was allow dads to see themselves through their daughter's eyes, which is a very different perspective on how you see yourself. Dads are told, well, do this and do this and do this. But really, you don't know what to do until you can really sit behind your daughter's eyes and see you as she sees you. It's very important for fathers to believe in their daughters and their sons. I mean, we really could include sons here as well, because if you don't believe in them as a gift to you, that they can succeed, that they are somebody, if you don't believe that in your heart, don't say anything, because kids know when you're faking it. If you go out and you say, oh, you can be great, oh, you can be great, and they know they can't, they think you're a liar. So what convinced me that day was that my dad, I heard his belief in me. So a father first needs to believe in his kids, his their ability to be the good person God meant them to be. They are a gift that God has given them. They are
Absolutely.
capable of, they're here for a reason. And a good dad's job is to help those kids find the reason. And the reason isn't necessarily to get straight A's or to be, an elite soccer player or whatever. The reason is to be a great person who can serve other people well, to have strong character. And so if a father starts there, I can see my daughter. I've studied my daughter. I see that she's a courageous person. I believe she can develop that courage, and I'm going to help her do that. And so if you don't have those beliefs that can grow moving forward, she'll never grab onto anything, because kids don't want to grab onto anything that's fake or that's contrived or that's sort of a pat cliche, oh, you can be president when you grow up. Well, most kids can't be president. If you would even want them to be. But to sort of say, I'm your father and this is where I know you can land. My job is to help get you there. So that's how you express your dreams and your wishes. And they're different for every father for his child.
Yeah, and for me, I see it as a privilege to be their parent, right? And so every day I have to give them my best.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I always dive into is that, and I remind myself of this on a daily basis, is how I react to them either dims their light or it brings the best light out of them, right? And so I know that I'm one of those people that foundationally help create the inner monologue in their head, right? And so I know it's so crucial for us dads to be not just present physically, but emotionally and be intelligent enough to look into what we say. They watch everything, right?
Oh,
They
yeah.
see our movements, our body language. They see how we act more than they see how we speak. And so, man, that's just such a crucial thing. So, what are some questions that you think dads can ask about their children that would kind of help create that game plan, that monologue? Because one of the things I remember you saying was, "Am I capable? Am I smart? Or am I
Mhm.
dumb? Or am I stupid?" You kind of had these contrasting questions that kids often ask about
Mhm.
their parents.
I believe that was in the chapter, I could be wrong, but teacher to fight, because the
Hmm.
war is in her mind. The war is in her mind of not believing anything good about herself. But the father, and the father alone, has that power to change those thoughts. So what I would ask frequently of your daughter, particularly as they come in the prepubertal years, is, you know, what do you think about, how kids behave. What do you think about girls who dress that way? How do you feel when so-and-so says something to this? So ask them questions, probing, how does that make you feel? What do you think about this? Ask her opinion of things. And if you just ask some general questions, asking her opinion, asking if she'll do things with you, that's a huge boost to her self-esteem, letting her know you want her company. Girls don't feel like anybody really wants to be with them. But when dad says, hey, I'm going to go change the oil in my car Saturday morning, will you just come along with me? I haven't seen you in a while. And then, in those moments, just, hey, how has school been this week? What was good that happened to you this week? Tell me one thing that was really hard for you this week. And so talk to them on an emotional level. Don't just say, what were your grades and how did geography go and how did your math test go? I mean, that's fine. You want to show interest, but you want to dig a little bit deeper. And, how did it feel when, your best friend refused to talk to you and went off with some other friends? Girls can be brutal, in middle school and junior high. And to sort of see what she's going through and then just dive into that and ask very, very simple questions. How did that make you feel? What did you see? What do you think about? Boy, they'll open up and they'll start talking and they won't stop. If you listen, if you ask a question and sit there and listen, don't ask a question to teach your daughter something. Ask a question to understand her. And mothers often ask a question to teach our kids something. We ask a question with the answer in mind, which is the correct answer, which is ours. So as our daughter is answering, we formulate our response to her answer to correct her. And that's one of the things I found dads don't do as often as mothers. So when you ask a question, listen and follow up and just listen. If you want to get your daughter to talk, just start listening to her.
That's so beautiful, because what you're doing is you're getting to the intent and the heart of what matters to her, and then
Exactly.
you're embracing and you're fostering the growth within that. So
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. Now, Dustin, I think, had something to follow up there. So
Yeah. So Dr. Meeker, my dad wasn't around, so I didn't necessarily have that model to show me what those conversations would be like, how to open up like that. My mom was wonderful about it, but I didn't have that dad around to do it. What advice would you have to fathers like myself who did not have their father around to learn how to have those conversations?
Well, that's a great question, because there are a whole lot of dads out there that didn't have a dad. First of all, I would study the character of Jesus and the character of Father God. And you can create a mental image of how you as a father are to talk and to walk and to touch and to be with her. As far as figuring out what to say and how to communicate with your daughter, study her. Who does she talk to? What does she like to do on the weekends? What does she not like to do? What do you think she's struggling with? What do you think she's not struggling with? And one of the best ways to really start getting through to your daughter and nurture a good relationship, find what she likes to do and then go do it with her. Dads will often say, I want to spend a lot of time with my daughter. And great. So I take her fishing and I take her golfing. Well, that's great, but find out what she would like to do. Don't just drag her into your world. Find what's happening a little bit in her world and jump in there and say, you know what, honey, I know you love going to the movies. Why don't you and I go to a movie, Friday night? Or, I love having breakfast. And I know you eat, but why don't we on Saturday mornings just go out and have breakfast? You start with the very simple things and you study her. And if you're intent on figuring out what she likes and doesn't like, you'll figure it out within a week.
All those suggestions also work for your wife too, guys.
Yes,
So
they do. She was a daughter.
study your wife.
Yep. Study your wife. Yep. And it's not that hard. I mean, everybody says that girls are a mystery. I guess they are. Sometimes just ask, I know that daughters and mother and your wives always want you to be able to read their minds, and you can't. And I remind women all the time, your dad doesn't know what you want from him. So you have to say what you want. If you need him to say, I love you, say, Dad, I just need you to hug me. Dad, I just need you to hear, I love you, because he loves you, but often it comes out sideways. And so he doesn't know how to get it through to you. So tell him, and kids will do that. Young girls, okay. And it makes them feel good that they can sort of say that to their dads, because most dads are pretty receptive. They're like, oh, thank you, you know.
I like it. That makes a lot of sense. Study. So in my case, I have a son. He's 4 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and I see that all the time. I'll try to have him jump into activities,
Yeah.
and he's really not that into him. I'll make him do it for a little while just to make sure, and then I'll realize
Mm-hmm.
this is really not his thing. So it is my intent.
And that's okay.
You know,
Just being with him. Yeah.
definitely. And if anything, it's better. I don't want him to be a carbon copy of me, because I won't learn anything. I think it's a nice opportunity if he's different from me to learn more about him. So if we can transition to boys a little bit, again, I have a 4-year-old. I'm looking at the future of what education and work is going to look like for him. Over the past 10 years, I'm sure you've seen it. Girls are crushing boys in every measure, academics, work, all of that, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I'm curious if you think you understand why we're seeing that trend occurring, and what I can do as a father for my son to help him buck that trend and not be that typical boy that we're seeing that's falling behind his female peers.
Right. Years ago, I wrote a book called Boys Should Be Boys, and I'd probably be blackballed if I wrote that again with that title. But here's the problem. You know, you're right. Girls are excelling because they've been pushed to excel. They've been pushed into STEM. There also is a early elementary school and middle elementary school bias towards girls. Okay. Girls sit there, they color in the lines, they say yes, they say no, they don't jump up and spit spitballs at people. You know, they're not bouncy, and they're not shooting pencils at people. And the problem is, boys are much more likely to get labeled as something very early on. If I had a quarter for every third, second, fourth grade boy that comes into my office with a note from his teacher saying, I really think he has ADHD, I would be a very wealthy person. So first of all, boys in the early school years are working in a system that is not helping them. It's hurting them. A lot of the early elementary school teachers are women, and they don't like when boys are giving them a hard time. And so educationally, they're sort of primed to fall behind. After that, I really believe girls are given a lot of attention. They're pushed hard. I think they're pushed harder than a lot of boys are. Boys are getting very mixed messages about what masculinity is all about and what being a boy is all about. They're almost trained, at least in public schools, to feel bad if they're a boy who likes to shoot targets. I mean, if you like to shoot targets or skeet or hunt with your dad, you don't tell anybody because you're ashamed of who you are. And so I think psychologically, boys, there's a lot working against boys. Boys are being shamed early on. And I think what happens is their self-esteem goes down, and they don't believe that they can perform as well as their female counterparts. Boys typically read later than girls do. And so early on, they feel like they're behind. And then again, I think I'd like to see a study on how often are boys called on in class versus girls. I'll guarantee you girls are called on much more frequently. And so I think that mindset follows them into junior high, and then in high school. It's not an intelligence issue. It's a psychological manipulation of what's going on in their environment, where they're getting messages that, you know, maybe they can and maybe they not. They, you know, if they're a little bouncy, they're a pain to people and they need medication. You know, if they like to shoot and they like to pretend they're hunting bears, well, just don't talk about it. You know, on the other side, if they have more feminine character qualities, by all means talk about that. You know, that's terrific. So they're floating in no man's land, and no one's teaching them how to be a strong masculine boy who likes himself, who's smart, and is going to just, you know, run with things and run with life and feel good about who he is. So I really don't think it's an academic issue or an intellectual issue. I think it's a social and psychological issue.
Yeah, it's a really good point across the board you were making there. I'm just even my own experience. And I was a really good student, right? 4.0, like worked really hard, turning, you know, I was in detention all the time, sweeping rocks after school all the time. I got suspended once. Like, boys are just wired different. So I was still getting straight A's and still getting in trouble all the time.
My husband, who's my medical partner, we started practice together. When he was in early elementary school, the teacher would punish him and put him in the hall, and he'd run home. And his dad would haul him back, and the crazy teacher next day put him in the hall. He'd run away. That's what boys do. But we don't tolerate that. We don't tolerate the antics of boys. One of the biggest mistakes a teacher will make is they want to punish a boy. They make him stay in for recess. Are you kidding me? That's the word. Get a tree, a big tree, put it on the playground, and let them climb up and down it. Let them work that energy out. So if they fall, they're going to break their arm. Oh, well, move on. Let them be who they are. And as much as we say, oh, we want to champion who our kids are and help them be their true selves, we don't do that. We don't do that. With boys who are getting in trouble and they're throwing rocks and doing things that are almost illegal, we don't go, oh, you're just ridiculous. You're so silly. We really come down hard on them for being a masculine boy. And that's really not right.
It's amazing. When my son is physically exhausted, he pays incredible attention to me. He listens the best when he's drenched in sweat and can barely breathe.
Exactly.
It's amazing. He's tired. He pays attention. Yeah.
One of the best things, and studies bear this out, that a dad can do with his son and with his kids is wrestle. Physically exhaust that kid. Boys bond with their dads through physical play and contact. Now, your wife will get furious because you're not helping out, but you're off out playing with the kids. Play with them, exhaust them, run them around the house, chop wood with them, because that's really how you bond with them and get through to them, and how they learn to really connect with you.
It's such a beautiful point. And my quick follow-up to, you said it's not an academic issue. It's a psychological issue, you think. So tactically, we want to help change this trend, right? With this podcast and equipping men to do differently. What are your top recommendations then for in the day-to-day men need to be aware of and kind of stand up and fight back against the trend?
Yeah. Well, listen to your gut. I think that most men, the overwhelming majority of good men, don't follow their gut. They sort of allow it to be blocked by, well, I don't think I should say that. And my wife doesn't like firearms, even though my son is picking up a stick and shooting at imaginary things in the front yard. Go out to him and say, hey, great. What are you shooting? What are you doing? So if you see a traditionally masculine character quality in your son arising, encourage it. Tell him it's wonderful. The same thing in yourself. If you find that you have a 13-year-old daughter and she's going into school in clothes that you think are very inappropriate, even though your wife says, no, that's the way all girls dress, stop her. Don't let her go to school in clothes like that. Your gut says, no, that's not okay. Then act on that. If your gut says it's really fine for my son to be doing this, it's fine for my son to take a risk. We are so risk averse as parents. We don't want our kids to get hurt or have anybody say anything bad to them, whatever. But we need to let our sons and our daughters take some risks. And dads are pretty good at that because they've taken risks, right? What did you say? You used to throw rocks all over? Act on your own instincts. And if they're masculine, wonderful. If you see them in your son, wonderful. And if you see some strength in your daughter, champion it and help her run with it. But don't hold back and dampen down what you're going to say because you feel someone's not going to like it. Who cares?
And Dr. Meeker, I'm sure you're familiar with I'm sure you're familiar with the biology behind this. When a woman has a child, her amygdala, the fear center, triples in size, and it never shrinks. Right. So you're always going to be as nervous about your 60-year-old daughter when you're 80 as you were, when she was just born. And of course, the man's amygdala, doesn't change in size at all, right? So it's like it's like nature designed the man to be a little bit riskier and let our kids take
I
chances.
thrive
And
on
Ab-
fear.
yeah.
Absolutely right. And I will tell you, studies show that, you know, that's why kids need a mom and a dad. They need the feminine,
Mhm.
they need the masculine. Of course, they're very different in there.
Absolutely.
But as mothers, we tend to be very overprotective. I gave my kids so many illnesses when they were little. I mean, I ran so many tests on them. My pediatrician threatened to kick me out of his practice. My husband, who's a pediatrician too, never did that. Oh, they're fine. They're fine. You know, my son walked around with a broken leg for 2 days before my husband said, I think something might be wrong there. And so, you know, it's good to allow your kids to get dirty, to take risks, and
Yeah.
to just figure out life and let them fail, because failure is what really makes leaders. Leaders
Yep.
aren't born through all success. Most are born through
Yeah.
tremendous failures.
Definitely. And just a quick point to men again, you know, don't just downplay your wife's read on a situation. It's usually a very good barometer. There's been multiple times where I'm like, no, it's fine. And I think about it for a minute and I'm like, I think my wife's right on this. And lo and behold, she was 100% on. So it's, you know, it's okay to defer.
It is okay to defer.
Her sense is strong on purpose. It's a survival
Exactly.
instinct. Don't just discount it.
Yep.
Hey there. We hope you're enjoying this episode of the Present Fathers Podcast. Our mission is to reach as many men as possible and equip them to be excellent family leaders. We believe that by inspiring and equipping men, we can change bloodlines and positively impact our culture. You can join us on this mission and partner with us today by doing one of two things. First, go to your favorite podcast platform, whether that's YouTube videos or Apple or Spotify, Google, etc., and leave us a review. The way the algorithm works is that it really values reviews, and this helps promote our stories to get them out to more people. The second way you can help is by sharing your favorite episodes with friends and family. Help us get the word out so that we can make a difference in our culture. Thank you for watching, and we hope that you join us in our mission to change lives.
Yeah, but at the same time, like one of the things I do with my son, he wants to go on adventures, which is basically just going out into the empty fields near our neighborhood, go into the woods. I've bought him an axe. Last week, I bought him an axe, and I've got him a new pocket knife because we're trying to transition him with rites of passages into young boyhood. And I said, what I'm going to start doing with you, son, is I'm going to be giving you more responsibility. But with that, you have to be able to remember the words I tell you and discern what's too dangerous and what's not. But if you're going to do something dangerous, you need to be calculated, you need to be patient, and you need to be just remember what I tell you as far as like being responsible with that danger. Like we have to be, you can still do dangerous things, but do it carefully, right? Do it calculated.
Absolutely.
And man, like I did that with him, and like every day, hey dad, right after school, can we go chop some wood in the woods and, you know, like go find some stuff to make, you know, fire and stuff like that. And so I looked at my wife the other day, I was like, you know, I've got him for the rest of his life, right? You know, because like that's all he wants to do is just hang out with dad, right? And do dangerous stuff. And
well, and
but
you know,
so it's
those are instincts in him. And I really wanted to press that point, because a lot of people, younger people now, feel that kids are born and we shape them into boys, or we shape them into girls, or we shape them into choosing whatever. Kids are born who they are. You know, I have a 2-year-old grandson. It sounds just like your son. Anything that has a motor or moves or is loud, he has to be near. I talked to my daughter yesterday. I said, what are you doing? She said, well, Jonathan just took Wally to Lowe's. I said, oh, to look at chainsaws. Oh, does he need a new chainsaw? No. Well, he just wants to look at chainsaws. He just turned 2. You don't teach a child that. That's the way they are.
That boy's going places.
Oh, you know, and his dad lets him use a real axe. Now, I did sort of gasp at that one. I said, please never let him have that in his hand without you there. But here's the point. No one taught him that. No one taught him to want to hear motors and things. It is what it is. Now, if they had come along and said, oh, no, 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 let's go play with this doll, good luck. He'd rip the head off the doll. You really need to allow your children to be who they are and to embrace it and to nurture it. So good for you.
Yeah, and that's the reason I was able to do that was thankfully one to you and to John Eldridge. You both have books that are amazing for this topic, which is yours is always boys should be boys, and then John's is Wild at Heart, and they're both fantastic reads for dads that want to help their kids do dangerous things in a safer way, right? Let them run loose and get the energy out.
Yeah.
So
embrace it and teach them how to do that well. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, the sense of adventure is for either gender is such a powerful thing in a young mind, right? And with your recommendation earlier, kind of learn your child, right, on where theirs naturally wants to go towards, but then lead them into that and show them, the brave new world and all that kind of stuff. And I think in the times where I've carved out time to go do that with my daughter, she just lights up in a way that nothing else makes her do that, and it's such a powerful opportunity we have as dads to provide that for our children. We've talked a little bit about cultural, but what are some of those cultural challenges that you think, or what in your opinion are kind of the top ones facing men today that we need to start changing?
I think that men really need to embrace the fact that they've got this. I think a lot of men can be very successful in their job or their sport or other ventures. But then when they come home and it's with their kids, I see a timidity. I just don't know. What if I mess it up? If you mess it up, you mess it up. It's okay. And so that keeps them from engaging and being who their best to their kids, is the timidity. And strong women like myself don't help. I remember trying to sort of, when my husband would be talking to our daughters, and I go, no, that's not how you say that. And I'd swoop in and sort of shift the dynamics. And you can't do that. That would just make my husband realize, okay, she knows better than I. And so I think get over that and convince yourself you are wired with everything you need right this moment to be a great dad to your kid. It's simple. Just get back to the basics, and don't back off. You feel protective, protect them. You want to hug them and you feel affectionate, hug them and touch them. I think the other big issue that men face, and women too, is screens. I think I can't tell how many times I'll look down and I'll see a dad on a screen and his kids standing right there looking at the dad. Because screens are addictive, games are addictive, football's everything. And so you can't be present with your kid if you're looking at a screen. We all have that problem. And so to be very, very aware of that. So when you come home at night and it's dinner time, put your phone or in your laptop in a place and don't move it for an hour. Put it in a lockbox. It's so easy to pull out your phone and check your emails or whatever. And so I think that's a big distraction, because when you're off of a screen and you're looking at your child, that's how you can be present. But you can't look and engage your child while you're on your phone. Nobody can. So I would just start with those two things. Those are two biggies. Yeah,
I agree. To your first point, I think it's men don't know how to lead anymore. They've been taught how to not be leaders, actually.
Exactly.
And I believe that we are built for it. And see, even that comment right there, a lot of people, like to your point, people will be like, they'll blacklist me now because, how misogynist of you. And good leadership is a gift. A good leader is a gift to all who are under that leader, right? And leadership isn't barking orders at people. That's like 1% of the time that's leadership. No. It's mostly action and intention, and it's helping others maximize their potential, and what we've been talking about, explore this sense of wonder and things like that. So that's what a good leader does. But the second point about screen time, we've heard people say a lot, like men are just weak nowadays. I actually don't think that's the case. I think men today can be just as strong or just as capable as men ever have been. I think the problem is that we live in an age of more distraction than any human being has ever lived in. Mm-hmm. And the distractions for men are even more rampant. Pornography, video games, football, hitting the gym too much, or what. Like, there's just a million, even good things can become distractions nowadays. And to your point about honing in on and focusing, that's where intention, that's why we called this the Present Fathers Podcast, is because you have to make the conscious choice to pick that over something else. I think all men have it within them. And so I guess that's just, I wanted to make that point, just reassure guys listening to this that every dad has been in the exact same boat as you are right today, except there's a different set of challenges. It's a different problem set today than it was, 100 years ago. And that's okay. We just have to recognize it and put intention into practice and take action. So,
and it requires an unselfish. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Meeker.
I would encourage, once you have the intention and you know what you need to do, say, I'm going to spend less time on screens, have a plan. So how are you going to do that? Well, every day from 6 to 7 at night, I'm going to put this away. You have to have a plan. Even if you don't meet that plan, or you don't make it come to fruition, have one. Because if it's just an idea, okay, tonight I'm really going to concentrate on my kids, but you haven't planned to get rid of something that's a distraction, don't set yourself up for failure.
Yeah, I think too often we just hope is not a strategy.
No.
You have to put parameters in place to, if you're weak in an area too, that's a strength right there, is to identify your weaknesses, bring people around you who can help, and then limit distractions. Dustin, I think you had something you wanted to say though.
I think what's changed a lot in the past 20 years is there's so much distraction. Can be a bad thing, but it can also be a good thing. There's so much entertainment, so much to learn, so many exciting new avenues to explore. And it requires an inherent unselfishness of fathers to spend that time with our children, when the temptation is to take that time for ourselves. And it's so challenging with a young child. I do have all these other things. I want to focus on my podcast. I want to play sports. I have these other things. And I have to remind myself that I owe him the time and the presence to be a good father. And I have to put aside my selfish desires to spend that time with him. And once I do, it's wonderful. And I'm glad that I did. But I think for a lot of dads, there's just too much temptation and to go into other areas of entertainment and not be present with our kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And one of the way, sorry, go ahead.
The opportunities that men have to do so many more things than, maybe 20 years ago. It's very, very hard. And I would take that one step further. Once you say, okay, no to golf on a Saturday afternoon, you spend it with your child, that's great. But what you really need to be prepared for is saying no to golf when you've got a 14-year-old who's a pain and she doesn't like you and she doesn't want to be with you. That's when you need to really sacrifice and move in, not say, well, my daughter doesn't want to talk to me, so I'm going to go golf. That's your default. It makes you feel kind of good. You justify it. But if you're not trained to sacrifice and spend time with your kids when things are good, you'll never do it when they really need it, when things are going poorly.
That's an amazing point there, Dr. Meeker, that you got to build it up when it's good to handle it in hardship. But Brandon, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say that's so beautiful, because that's exactly kind of the thought process that I go through. Is one of the things my wife and I talk about is, statistically speaking, we get 18 good years with each of our children. And then after that, the rest of their life, we only usually get about another full year. So you get about 19 years statistically with your kids. And so it's like, you got to make those years count, because, none of us are promised tomorrow. No. So we got to be present today.
Well, and out of those,
it's 18, so important.
Out of those 18, you're going to have a couple years that are pretty rough. Particularly if you have 2 or 3 kids, you're guaranteed a few rough years in there. So that's why you need to prep yourself to handle those rough years, because you're right. And the rough years can be the real transition years for you and for your kids. Those could be the pivotal times in their lives where they go, oh, wow, my dad really loves me. And so you're absolutely right. I love your podcast name, The Present Dad, being present. It's hard for everybody. It doesn't feel natural, and it's not always fun, but it's something that we have to practice.
Yeah. It's hard work, but it's rewarding. It's the most rewarding work we'll do. Just kind of a flip on the line of discussion we're having right now. We're talking to current dads right now. I think too, another overlooked group of men, young men, maybe the hardest situation ever for this group, just teenage to early 20s men, looking to be dads one day, looking to start families. I mean, I can't imagine trying to navigate those waters today compared to like what it was when we were younger.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are some of the most important things that younger men need to do to prepare themselves for kind of being a dad in the modern age? How to attract the right woman, some of these things and things they need to improve on themselves to be prepared for that.
Well, I think that, preparing for kids means preparing for a solid marriage, and, to not settle. Don't just date to date. I'm not big on dating, even in our 20s. Our kids always sort of had the mindset, if the person isn't marriage material, don't even go out with them. And that's how you really end up finding that great person. I would also encourage them, sounds kind of silly, but I think it's important. Make 4 or 5 non-negotiables, write them down, character qualities that you want in a spouse, and don't compromise, because you're going to be physically attracted, you're going to be swept up in romantic feels and so forth. But if this person has to have a strong faith, has to be this and has to be that, that weeds things out. So I would do that. The next thing that I would do is just, work on being as strong as you can be as a man, and work on your character strengths and build those up. As far as being prepared to be a father, there's no good time. You just have to jump. I think a lot of men say, well, I need a good job and I need a house and I need this. Well, you're going to be 45 before you have your first kid. And, you've got it all in there. As I said, you're a 25-year-old man, a 22-year-old man, and you think you found that perfect person or the right person, and you're going to get married. You've got what it takes to be a great dad. It's going to be hard and you're going to make a lot of mistakes, but that's okay. You're going to make those mistakes in your 30s. So to prepare for being a dad who really understands infants, you can't prepare for that. All you can do is go into it and then ask for help as you get there. But you can do it. And there's so much good in the world. We talk about all the challenges and everything. There's so many wonderful things in the world to live for as a dad. And there are far more blessings in being a father than there are, challenges or frightening things. So just to really focus on that, children are always a blessing.
Agreed. And so for men, I have so many friends. I guess we're at that age where a divorce happens. They're single, non-ideal kinds of situations. What advice do you have to those men to still see their children as a blessing when they may feel that their life doesn't feel blessed at the moment?
Yeah. Well, they may not be blessed. However, a divorced dad, once the divorce happens, typically the self-esteem just plummets. I had a gentleman tell me the other day that every divorced dad is at risk for suicide. You should always consider them, because they feel like they failed. Because you're in a divorce situation does not mean you're a failure dad, period. Your kid still wants you. I don't care how they act or what they say. They still want you. They still need you. And you will always be the most important man in your child's life. Always, for good or ill. Every child takes one man to their grave. It's their dad. Because dad can either make your life wonderful or and strong, or can ruin it if, he just bails on you. So as a divorced dad, I would just say, first of all, fight the belief and feeling that you're a failure. You've made mistakes. We all do, but move forward. The second is you've got to reach out and ask a male friend to just help you, pray with you, meet with you, have coffee with you, because I think sometimes divorced men tend to isolate. They feel ashamed. They feel like their kids don't want them. So they isolate and they don't want to share with anybody. So you've got to reach out to another man and have a 1 or 2 men that you can really confide in and go, I'm miserable. This is horrible. And then always take the high road. A lot of times in a divorce situation, if there's a lot of animosity, the ex-wife will be really working against you, often to sabotage you. Take the high road. Always take the high road. Don't criticize her back, particularly in front of the kids, but just stay in your kids' lives. Stay doing what you're doing and never, ever, ever leave those kids. And I guarantee when they hit their late teens, early 20s, they'll be right there with you.
It's powerful advice.
Yeah. And it's a real problem. I mean,
Yeah.
half the population, right? So it's a lot of
And
people in that boat.
those men need men. You know, they don't need women their age to come along and, you know, and empathize with them. They need men. And so that's where something like, you know, your podcast can really help men.
Mm-hmm.
Which it does. So.
Yeah. And I would also encourage, you know, even if you're not a dad or you're married, men, period, like you need to build some friends that you can go get coffee with and have some real talk. I'll give a very personal anecdote. This last week, Monday was a really bad day for me. So a week ago, really rough day. I was not in a good mental state. And I met with two very close friends that I respect and trust to have deep conversation with. And within like 10 minutes of meeting them the next day for coffee, I was like, oh, all my problems are gone. I feel great now. Yeah. And it was just as simple as just being like, hey, man, I'm not doing good. And they listened for like 5 minutes, and one of them prayed for me real quick. And it was like, whoa,
amazing.
That was easy. Why did I wait so long? And then we spent the next several hours just talking about each other's lives. And like, I think all of us left feeling ready to go show up and be better husbands and fathers and better at work. But you know, it's common sense. So regardless of your situation in life, we harp on this a lot, but brotherhood is probably one of the most overlooked things in our modern era that you cannot live without. As a man, it is straight up a requirement.
And a man can give a man something his wife can't. And
correct.
My husband has a couple of very close male friends that know him so well. And I leave them to their friendship because they can give him something I can't give him. And it's like that with boys. Fathers give sons something a mother can't. You know, but it's okay. And it's good. It's meant to be that way, but we just need to face it and deal with it and not avoid it, but just embrace it because they're a gift, really.
Yeah. Yeah. We need both. And, you know, we live in such a polarizing age that everyone wants to be, you know, my side's better and that kind of stuff, but it takes some humility. You know, there's times when my daughter needs mom. I just need to be humble in that. And okay, that's fine. It's okay. It doesn't mean
but
I'm lesser.
It doesn't mean you're less important. She just
right. It's the right thing at the right time.
Mom gives her something and you give her something very different. And that's the way it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And humility and vulnerability are two of the most effective tools that we will ever wield. And so I'm just hoping that through this conversation, men are encouraged by that and seek that out because it is medicine for your soul, for your relationships, for your work, for everything. So thank you, Dr. Meeker, for just incredible wisdom, incredible advice. What's upcoming for you? How can we support you? What can the audience, where can they get plugged in with you?
Well, thank you so much. You know, I've done a whole lot in my life and written a lot of books, but what I'm really feel called to do at this time is I'm beginning to do coaching for fathers through Zoom calls, group calls, individual coaching if fathers, because we really need to quit complaining that fathers aren't doing this. And we need to sort of say, I'm here for you. Let's go. Your kids want you. It's not as far away as you think it is. So I'm doing that. And if anybody's interested in coaching, just go to my website, meekerparenting.com, or, I mean, we could put it up on your website too, and they can get hold of me. But I'm really,
we'll link
really
everything
enjoying
in the
that.
description.
Thanks.
That's outstanding. I'm excited to hear that. And can agree more that we need more resources like that out there for men. Cause I think, you know, a lot of guys will be like, well, I want to be better. Where do I start?
Exactly. Yeah. And exactly. And my whole point is, you know, the fact that they would come and be coached shows me they're a really good dad already. Anybody listening to your podcast is a good dad. They're trying. So let's just tweak it a little bit here and tweak it a little bit here. And just like you said, in a conversation with your friends within 10 or 15 minutes, the light goes on and you go, wow, why didn't I do that sooner? You know, and, you know, men just need a lot of encouragement. I also have a hidden agenda there. And that is, I believe that if we can encourage good dads to really lead their families, they're going to lead the other people around them. And it's going to have a multiplying effect.
Yes.
So if you really want to change the country for good, get to a dad and then just let him go. So that's my
So it
hope
starts
and
with
prayer
us.
is that I can sort of start spurring some dads on, that the light goes off and then they run with it. That's when real leadership is just going to start to multiply. And it's there. It's there. It's like you got all the wiring. You need somebody to come along and put a spark to it, and it goes bzz, and they're gone. They're off. So,
Yep. Couldn't agree more. I'm really excited to see what comes to fruition out of your efforts, Dr. Meeker. And, your works have already played a huge part in this podcast alone with the men here. And I'm sure countless other lives have benefited from your work. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing your heart with our audience. All the descriptions or all the links to everywhere you can meet with Dr. Meeker and find her books will be in the description below. So please go check them out. Dads, highly, highly, highly encourage you look into Strong Fathers or Hero for two to get started with. And again, just thank you so much, Dr. Meeker. Any closing thoughts for the audience?
I guess I would just say to every man out there, life is good, have hope, and you've got this. You've got this. So don't let anybody tell you you don't. And I'm so
Perfect.
grateful to come on your podcast. It's very, very humbling. And so thank you for all the good work that you're doing as well.
Thank you. That means a lot to us. All right, dads, you heard it from Dr. Meeker. Enough talk. Let's get climbing. We'll see you in the next episode.